지금 들어보나요? 하나 둘 셋. 알겠습니다. 일단 그러면 이거는 사회하고 나서 받아서 끝나는 거예요. 네. 네. 강연자분하고 사회자분 혹시 어디 계실까요?
아, 여기 사회자분.
네.
이게 촬영 지금 하면 될까요?
네. 저 지금 녹음용 마이크를
네.
해야 돼서요.
네.
앞뒤에다가 이렇게 꽂아주시면 될 것 같거든요.
아, 네. 알겠습니다. 됐나요?
네. 살짝 아래로 좀만 내릴까요?
한번 내려.
네, 좋습니다.
첫 번째 분.
네.
AI 때문에 지금 전원 꺼뒀는데 시작하면 바로 이거 버튼 한번 누르고 해주시면
아, 네. 알겠습니다.
녹음용 마이크를
저희 녹음용 마이크 한 번만 혹시 촬영 위해서 착용.
여기다 일단 입구 올라가서 들어오니까 포크 여기 거기 될것 같긴 한데
아,
여기다
하실
하면
거면 여기다 하는 게.
확보하시나요?
네.
아니 뭐 안 더우면 그냥 입구 아무나 덮겠죠. 여기다 하는 게 아니라 아예 선생님. 예,
저희
예.
부탁을 드렸는데 흔쾌히 허락을 해주셔서 너무 감사드리고
아이고. 덕분에 좀 방학을 굉장히 보람 있게 보내고 있는
강의 들으러 온 학생들이 많으십니다.
아이고 반갑습니다.
끝나시면
네.
빼서 주시면 돼요.
아, 네. 네. 알겠습니다. 알겠습니다.
Operation. Before we officially begin, we have a few housekeeping matters to share. First, please note that today's keynote session is being filmed and live streamed to overflow rooms for participants who could not join us in the main room. Additionally, these keynotes will later be uploaded to YouTube for wider academic access. If you have any questions or privacy concern regarding the recording, please feel free to speak with the information booth at the registration desk. Next in line with our commitment to hosting an eco-friendly conference, we have provided reusable cup, as you already have and use it, for all participants. We kindly ask you to write your name on your cup and use it throughout the 2 days of the conference to help us reduce waste. Your cooperation in making ICER 2026 sustainable is greatly appreciated. Finally, allow me to share a brief about important safety announcement. In the event of the fire emergency, please remain calm and immediately exit the building throughout the main doors. Please note that there is no scheduled safety drills today, so therefore if their fire alarm rings, indicates a real emergency situation. So please follow the guidance for our venue staff and exit the building safely. Thank you for all being with us today and welcome ICER 2026. To officially open the conference, it is my great pleasure to invite Professor Hyun-Seok Oh to deliver the welcoming remarks. Professor Oh is not only the director of the Education Research Institution here at SNU, but also the co-chair of the ICER 2026. Please join me in welcoming Professor Oh with a warm round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. Distinguished President of Seoul National University, respected keynote speakers, invited scholars, colleagues, students, and friends from around the world in Korea. As the director of Education Research Institute at Seoul National University, and on behalf of the organizing committee, it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to the 26th International Conference on Education Research, ICER 2026, here at the Seoul National University. For more than 60 years, since its establishment in 1963, the Education Research Institute has served as the global hub for education research and scholarship. This institute has sought to connect education theory, policy, practice, and people with the belief that meaningful educational research is created through the exchange of diverse perspectives. First, I would like to express our deepest appreciation to the President of Seoul National University, Hong-Min Yu, for honoring us with your presence today. Your participation reminds us that education research is not only the work of one institute, but a vital part of the university's public mission to understand society, cultivate future generations, and open more possibilities for the world. We are truly grateful for your support and for your congratulatory remarks. I also extend my sincere gratitude to our distinguished four keynote speakers, and 9 invited speakers. Thank you for bringing your insight and intellectual leadership to this conference. I'm equally grateful to all participants who have joined us around the world in Korea. Your presence makes ICER not only an academic event, but a global community of inquiry. We would like to deeply appreciate many institutions which sponsor and host this conference, including Korean Education Development Institute, 한국교육개발원, Korea Institute of Curriculum and Instruction, 한국교육과정평가, Learning Sciences Research Institute at Seoul National University, 서울대 학습과학연구소, Institute of Seoul School Violence Prevention and Center for Education Research at 이화 University, 이화여대 학교폭력 예방연구소와 미래교육입니다. BK21 Center for Science Education in the Infosphere at SNU, 서울대 인포스피어 과학교육연구단, BK21 Department of Education, 공주 내셔널 유니버시티, 공주대학교 BK21 사업단, Center for Modern Educational Studies at Korea National University of Education, 한국교원대 한국근대교육사연구센터, and finally, BK21 Institute for Innovation and Coexistence Education Research at the Department of Education at Seoul National University, 서울대학교 교육학과 BK21 혁신과 공존의 교육사업단. The theme of this year's conference is education research for the post, multiple interpretations and methodologies. The word post may appear to be only a prefix, but it names something profound about our time. We are not simply living after modernity, after colonialism, after the digital turn, or after the rise of artificial intelligence. We are living in a world where the past has only not fully passed. The present is deeply unsettled, and the future is arriving faster than our institutions can respond to. In this post-war education research, must take a deeper question. What kind of knowledge, human ontology and evolution, and the responsibility does education now require? This question becomes especially urgent in the age of artificial intelligence. AI is often described as a tool for efficiency, faster feedback, personalized learning, automated assessment, translation, tutoring, and data analysis. But AI is more than a tool. It is becoming part of infrastructure of global society, industry, and university disciplines. And furthermore, real civilization through which knowledge is totally differently produced, and education of the next generation is changing constantly. It changes how we learn and think. For more than 300 years, human beings have largely lived as beings who were instructed and ordered by others. Most of humanity has lived by receiving someone else's teaching and carrying out tasks assigned by somebody. Now AI is opening a new era in which all human beings are being transformed from those who are instructed into those who give instructions. This shift is fundamentally changing the very mode of human existence, the way we think and learn. For this reason, we have entered an age in which human agency, autonomy, curiosity have the most important human capabilities. Therefore, the AI era does not make education research less important. It makes education research more necessary from different perspectives and philosophies. This is why ICER 2026 is so meaningful. Over these 2 days, we will have 4 keynote lectures, 9 invited presentations, and 29 thematic sessions, 61 poster presentations, and 59 peer-reviewed papers in the conference proceedings. Yet the true value of this conference lies not only in its scale, but in the intellectual encounters it makes possible. Finally, but no less importantly, I would like to offer my special thanks to Professor Young-Mi Lee, our conference chair. Her vision, leadership, intellectual courage, and dedication have shaped this conference from the beginning. I am also deeply grateful to the preparation team, administrative staff, and the student volunteers. Much of their work has been invisible for several months, but because of their commitment, this conference is alive today. I thank them not only for what they have done, but for being here with us today, present, alive, breathing life into this community. I hope ICER 2026 will be a space where different theories meet, different methodologies challenge one another, and new questions begin. Welcome to ICER 2026, and please enjoy. Thank you.
Over 5 minutes, but thank you very much. Okay. It's now my great honor to invite Professor Hong Ryu, President of Seoul National University, to deliver his congratulatory remarks. He has graciously made time to celebrate ICER with us with the 80th anniversary of Seoul National University's College of Education. Please join me in welcoming President.
Good morning, distinguished scholars, honored guests, and colleagues, students. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to Seoul National University for the 26th International Conference on Education Research. On behalf of Seoul National University, I warmly congratulate the opening of this meaningful international conference. This year's theme, Education and Research for the Post-War Multiple Interpretations, Methodologies, could not be more timely. We live in an era shaped by artificial intelligence, digital transformation, climate change, demographic shifts, and growing social inequalities. These challenges demand more than new technologies or better solutions. These challenges require us to rethink and ask new questions about education, knowledge, and our shared future. We believe that universities have a unique and critical responsibility, not only to solve today's problems, but also to identify questions that will shape tomorrow. By beginning the SNU Grand Quest initiative, our university is embracing a new vision, which is to become an agenda-setting university that advances humanity by pursuing the fundamental questions facing our world. Meaningful innovation begins not simply with better answers, but with courageous questions that challenge existing assumptions and open new possibilities. In this regard, ICER 2026 exemplifies exactly the kind of scholarly dialogue that universities should foster. Rather than accepting inherited frameworks, this conference invites us to rethink the foundations of educational research itself. That is, how to understand learning, whose knowledge we recognize, and how education can respond responsibly to an increasingly complex and interconnected world. This year is especially meaningful as Seoul National University celebrates its 80th anniversary. For 8 decades, our university has contributed to Korea's educational, scientific, and social development. Especially the College of Education has been at the heart of this journey, preparing generations of educators, researchers, and leaders who have led education in Korea. As we look toward the next 80 years, I hope Seoul National University will continue to contribute new ways of thinking about the challenges facing humanity. I hope ICER 2026 will inspire meaningful dialogue, lasting international partnerships, and bold ideas that advance both educational scholarship and policies and practices. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the Educational Research Institute, the Department of Education, the College of Education, our many partner institutions, and everyone whose dedication has made this conference possible. Congratulations once again on opening the ICER 2026. I wish you all an inspiring and productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you, President Liu, for your encouraging and thoughtful remarks. Okay. Next, it's my pleasure to invite Professor Junhee Liu, Dean of the College of Education at Seoul National University, to deliver her congratulatory remarks. Please welcome Professor Liu.
Good morning, friends. My name is Junhee, and I'm the Dean of College of Education at Seoul National University. I will try to save our time for the committee members. First of all, it's my great honor to welcome all the friends around the world. I guess it's a kind of a good signal to discuss of our education crisis. The theme, the post-world, the education research in post-world. So I guess it can be very fruitful research and discussion at the end of the conference. I would like to point out our College of Education at SNU. SNU College of Education is very unique college because we have 15 departments. One department is education, and the other 14 department is subject matter education. So that's why we can very strong potential to overcome the educational crisis at this moment, especially we say the AI transformation. So AI is a little bit some subcategory of this conference theme, but I found that a theme is everybody is interested to go through with this kind of AI big transformation areas. At the same time, this conference is 26th conference, and at first it is very concentrated on educational research in general. But this conference this year, we tried to collect all the subject matter education in these conference sessions. So you may attend what researches are going on the other subject matter education. So that's why I think this ICER has a big power, and it's growing, still growing. It's still big, but still growing conference in the world. So that's one thing. So I hope this ICER 26 will become the place of the thoughtful and dialogue and genuine connections. What the most impressive word at the front desk is beautiful. So during this conference, I wish you all guys stay safe and enjoy this beautiful and intellectually curious conference. Thank you.
for your kind work and continued support. Well, we'll now watch the congratulatory video message from President Youngnam Ko of the Korean Educational Development Institution, who unfortunately could not join us in person today. So please direct your attention to the screen.
Distinguished speakers and honored guests, it is a great honor for me to offer my sincere congratulations on the opening of the 26th International Conference on Education and Research. On behalf of Korean Educational Development Institute, I would like to express my deep appreciation to the Educational Research Institute at Seoul National University and the ICER Organizing Committee, whose dedication and efforts have made this conference possible. I also extend a warm welcome to all participants who have traveled to Seoul from around the world. This year's theme, Education Research for the Post-World, Multiple Interpretations and Methodologies, addresses one of the most important questions facing education today. As we navigate an era shaped by artificial intelligence, digital transformation, demographic change, and growing global uncertainty, many of the assumptions that have long guided educational research and practice are being reconsidered. In this context, the various perspectives explored at this conference encourage us to critically reflect on how we understand knowledge, learning, and human development. Amid these transformations, however, one fundamental question persists. What should remain at the center of education? While educational environments continue to change, the essential purposes of education endure. Fostering human dignity, nurturing agency, and enabling individuals to live responsibly with others in society. Korea's educational experience may offer a useful reference point for these discussions. Over the past decades, Korea has undergone remarkable educational expansion, rapid technological transformation, and significant social change. These experiences remind us that educational progress involves not only embracing innovation, but also preserving the core commitments that give education its meaning. KD is honored to contribute to this dialogue through its special session, What Survives the Post? Defending the Human in Education. As we explore new paradigms and possibilities, we must also ask which values and purposes of education deserve to endure and be passed on to future generations. I am confident that ICER 2026 will serve as a meaningful platform for deepening international dialogue, connecting diverse perspectives, and advancing educational research in ways that benefit both local and global communities. Once again, I offer my heartfelt congratulations on the opening of this conference, and I wish ICER 2026 every success. Thank you.
Thank you, President Ko, for your thoughtful message, even though he cannot hear us. Next, we are pleased to present a congratulatory video message again from President Moon Hee Kim of the Korea Institution of Curriculum and Evaluation. He could not join us in person today, so due to the unavoidable circumstance. So please enjoy his video message.
Good morning. I am Moon Hee Kim, President of the Korea Institute for Curriculum and Evaluation. It is my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to the 26th International Conference on Education and Research. Since 2009, KAIST has been proud to serve as co-host of this distinguished conference. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the conference chair, Professor Kyung-mi Lee, the co-chair, Professor Hyun-Suk Oh, and the members of the organizing committee for their dedication in making this event possible. I also extend my warm welcome to all participants who has joined us from around the world at the College of Education, Seoul National University. The theme of ICER 2026, Education Research for the Post-War, Multiple Interpretation and Methodologies, is both timely and thought-provoking. The prefix post encompasses a wide range of contemporary realities: post-pandemic, post-human, post-truth, and post-AI, among others. Each of these terms challenges us to reconsider existing assumptions and to reflect on what is ahead while remaining attentive to endure educational values. Precisely because the post-word defies any single interpretation, it calls for diverse perspectives and methodological pluralism in educational research. Over the next 2 days, researchers, practitioners, and graduate students from across the globe will explore how education can respond to profound social, technological, and cultural transformations, and how educational research can continue to generate meaningful knowledge in times of uncertainty. I hope this conference will provide a vibrant platform for intellectual exchange, interdisciplinary dialogue, and collaborative learning across national and institutional boundaries. Once again, I extend my sincere gratitude to the College of Education and the Education Research Institute of Seoul National University for hosting this significant event. I also thank all presenters and participants for contributing their expertise, insights, and commitment to the advancement of education research. I wish you a productive and inspiring conference, as well as good health and happiness. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes all the congratulatory remarks for ICER 2026. So we want to also thank for the institutions and organizations that have supported us for ICER 2026 can happen. So we will now have our official conference photo session. So
hello everyone. So we're gonna have our photo time at this moment. We're gonna capture all the beautiful faces at ICER 2026. And so if you can just all sit on your seats, we'll take the photo from up front. And so first we'll have a photo time. So if you can have your beautiful smiles, I'll count to 3 and we can all take the photo. Okay. Are you? Okay, everyone get. So just ready? Okay. Okay. Yes, please bring out your biggest smiles. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. Also, we have a small part 2. We have, we want to take a small video of ICER, especially we want to celebrate, all the hard work that went into preparing for ICER, whether you're a participant or just or the staff member. And so, the count of 3, we want to say beautiful ICER, and then maybe we can even do a slight wave and for some liveliness. And so on the count of 3, if you can all shout beautiful ICER as it's on the screen, that would be great. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful ICER. Okay. That was practice? Okay, we'll do it one more time. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful ICER. Perfect. Thank you.
We have some delayed issues, but we need to take a break, right? So thank you. We are now closing the opening ceremony. So please take a 2 or 3 moments to stretch a little before we move on our 2 exciting keynotes. So each session will feature a 40 minutes presentation, following immediately by a 10-minute Q&A session. So we highly encourage you to participate and share your insights during the discussions. So it is now my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Kyung-Suk Chang, distinguished professor of sociology at Seoul National University. Professor Jang is one of the Korea's most prominent sociologists and internationally respected scholar whose work has made significant contribution to our understanding of modernity, social change, citizenship, family, and development in Korea and East Asia. He is especially well known for his influential theory of complex modernity, which has become a key concept in Korean studies and in broader discussion of social transformation in East Asia. His scholarship helps us understand how rapid economic development, social change, family transformation, citizenship, and institutional crises are deeply interconnected in contemporary society. His work speaks powerfully to the theme of this year's conference, Education Research for the Post-War, Multiple Interpretation and Methodologies. In the time when societies are facing overlapping crises and familiar frameworks are being examined, Professor Chang's insight invite us to think critically about the social condition in which education, citizenship, and human development are shaped. Today, Professor Chang will deliver our first keynote addressing with the title Education, Educationalization, and Compressed Modernity, offering an important perspective on how we might understand education in this changing post-war. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the Professor Kyung-Suk Chang.
I'm Jang-Kyung-Suk, socialist department. This is overwhelming. I'm meaning truly. This August, I will retire from the university after teaching sociology 35 years. But I'll be around some more years on research basis. My being here has been determined within a very short time. And I am very thankful to professors in College of Education and Department of Education and the Institute. And I have been, as I'm about to formally retire from teaching, and I've been from undergrad to all the way to PhD and also the professor position, and it's been all the way sociology, okay, and but as a sociologist, I found myself actually doing something else, and I've been always thinking that it might be very nice if I have another chance to interact with scholars in other disciplines on a transdisciplinary basis and interact, because I think my work in various areas have been developed mainly out of this transdisciplinary framing of Korean realities and also East Asian realities. So, and in that process, especially when I think write about compressed modernity, education struck me as a decisive issue, structural issue here. And I'm finally here to formally speak about education and compressed modernity, and this is so meaningful in my scholarship, and it's quite tempting to write a book on it, under this title. And I didn't think that I would be able to do it, but if you encourage me, then the book could actually be produced. Maybe in 10 years, something like that. And if you, in 10 years, if you find out that book is actually published, then you just write to me, and I will make sure that you get free copy of that book. Okay, but if it's actually published. Because of the time limitation, I will just first read this kind of long, summary. It's included in the proceedings, but to be safe, let us. And this, summary, talks about various dimensions and components of education as decisive, the issue in South Korea. Nothing is, too new. It's all about things you already know. But I just wanted to logically organize these various dimensions of education from compressed modernity and citizenship perspective. So let me just read. Education has been one of the most distinct aspects of South Korea's modernity or compressed modernity. I present an analytical explanation of historical social conditions and socio-political consequences of so-called education zeal of South Koreans in a citizenship perspective. It reflects the theoretical analytical effects by which education takes on decisive significance for South Koreans' citizenship on all fronts. South Koreans boast themselves as the world's best educated population in terms of the highest level of enrollment in colleges and universities. As these tertiary institutions learning are quite hierarchically positioned, they require students at the lower levels of schooling to study excessively for acceptance in better colleges and universities, leading to widely pathological consequences for youth. On the other hand, South Koreans' private share of the entire public education budget and the proportion of the educational spending in the nation's GDP are known to be respectively the world's highest. A majority of South Korean parents have felt extremely stressful about the heavy educational expenses, whereas even young people feel severely intimidated in choosing or planning marriage and childbirth by the anticipated heavy burden of educating children. This year, me as parents, my two children in their 30s have started their graduate schools. And so this is a very important personal issue to me, so I have to support them a few more years. At the societal level, education, especially at the higher levels, has been crucially instrumental to the nation's all fundamental transformations since its liberation from Japan, including the condensed institutional modernization into a liberal system of social political governance and economic regulation, and expeditious, extensive capitalist industrialization buttressed by human capital. The potent democratization movement propelled by the allied forces of intellectual students and workers, and the technological and cultural surge into global leadership. South Korea's multifaceted compressed modernity has been educationalized in a very broad sense. Whether it is quality, the intensity, the universality of education that has been the most decisive for education, such contribution is debatable. Nonetheless, it is beyond dispute that South Koreans' educational fervor has both bolstered and it's been intensified by these societal transformations that tend to necessitate collectively organized efforts at mostly international knowledge transmission and utilization. In citizenship terms, formal education has critically enabled South Koreans to march into modern institutional, developmental, political, and scientific and cultural citizenship. A sort of transformative collectivism has governed the South Koreans' educationalized citizenship. In a great paradox, however, South Koreans' access to education itself has remained quite dubious as citizenship rights. Public education has been constitutionally stipulated both as every citizen's right and duty ever since the nation's independence. The South Korean government has been consistently effective in promptly establishing public schools and mobilizing civilians to set up private schools that operate by the largely same curricula and financial rules, leaving virtually no children beyond the region of access to universal public education. However, the same government used to keep working even until the beginning of the 21st century on its legal duty to provide free public education up to the constitutionally designated level of middle school, 7th to 9th grade. Most South Korean adolescents attain college and university diplomas, not as a citizenship right, but as parental gift. An aspect of education in which South Koreans do make a strong citizenship claim is the governmental regulation and management of various components of college and university entrance examinations. In presidential and parliamentary elections, the reform of 대학 입시, the system of college university entrance examinations, is quite frequently presented as a key election pledge, whereas the problem of nearly universal and excessive financial burdens for college and university education curiously remained untouched very recently. The popular apprehension about fair and transparent exams for college and university entrance sensitively reflects the above-mentioned instrumentality of higher education in all major components of modern citizenship. To the extent that such citizenship instrumentalities of education are conditioned upon meritocratic differentials and hierarchies, South Koreans commonly shared anxiety about the college university exams falls short of constituting a clear socio-political basis of social citizenship. So I still have 30 minutes left, so I could elaborate on this. The summary also, what I would say today, you'll find related contents in these writings of myself. I'll just show you the cover of my recent books on compressed modernity. The left one is The Logic of Compressed Modernity, published 2022, and the right one is published just last year. And also, these books actually did very well. And also, the left blue book was published in 2010, and also Chinese edition was published 2024. And this Chinese edition was sold in China. The volume, that sales is much bigger than the total number of books I sold. The other books, okay. And this is rather puzzling. Why China is excited about, and they read this book, the Chinese edition, not as something about Korea, but rather they use this as kind of indirect and a textbook about China's latest realities. So this is puzzling, and this gives me big duty to explicate the phenomenon. This is a social phenomenon in a sense, and so if they read this book as material, it's indirect manual for Chinese realities, then I'm not really confident. I wouldn't say that this is about my intended intended, academic achievement. But anyhow, so the compressed modernity. Let me, instead of reading this passage, let me just give you some analogy. This is about you eating food. Okay, a lot of food and a lot of different kinds within a short time. But it's also important to, indicate that this university has been around for 80 years. Okay, so 80 years is not a short time anymore. And then during those 80 years, they have been internalizing so many different things, so extensively and intensively, and have ended up making their life and society, the economy, transforming as a result of such internalization of all these civilizational, historical, economic, and other forces and resources and influences, and so the Korea is everything in that sense, and you have to find out how, somehow the way you can kind of organize such diverse things in huge amounts. How would you organize? Again, eating. If you eat a lot of food, a lot of different kinds within a very short time, you have to be very careful. You have to be very skillful in digesting all these things, and then also you also have to find out somehow. You have to enjoy your life, right? So you also have to develop some kind of cultural, psychological, philosophical mechanisms by which you can deal with this compressed modernity. So they actually this is done in the best way by I think the pop culture, Korean cinemas and K-pop and dramas, and I think they are fantastic in taking advantage of this Korean situation. Let me just because the overall conference theme is the post-war. I like to explain some part of this compressed modernity. This is the South Korea as multiplex theater society. This is chapter 4 of the logic of compressed modernity. In that book, I explain that there are multiple modernities inside Korea, all existing simultaneously. First, the colonial dialectical modernity. Korean nation as a whole became very liberal in order to resist the authoritarian colonial state. And also they turned quite socialist because they were exploited as colonial capital subjects. So when Korea got liberated, these two lines of the ideology was very strong. Even now, in civil society, you have very strong influence of this kind of. It's kind of antinomic that the Korean civil society is liberally socialist, and so this is colonial dialectical modernity, which is still very important. The post-colonial reflexive institutional modernization, this will be explained further as part of the education issue, that after liberation, Americans came in as the winner of the World War II, and it's obvious that in order to set up yourself as modern entity, and also because under the American pressure that they couldn't, think about going back to history, thinking that our, the traditional system was abolished by Japan, against our own will. That didn't happen, right? So the nation state formation was basically reflexive, institutional, assimilation process. So this involved a lot of actually learning about the institutional conditions of modernity. And the post-colonial neo-traditional modernity is about Koreans at the micro social level. They wanted to recover some of their dignities and integrities and here it is very important that all Koreans, now they are, politically they became kind of modern, equal social political subjects, okay? And then they matched this Confucian, family culture and also values. So all Koreans became kind of Confucian. They kind of aristocratized their, lifestyles and family relations, and ended up, worshiping their ancestors lavishly. And so this is post-colonial neo-traditionalist modernity, as part of this modernity. And the Cold War and the free world modernity, after Korean War, Korea was not just Korea, but it was part of this, free world, and in this, situation, a lot of Koreans began to explore their, life trajectories in this context. So the 80 years of this university, big part of that has something to do with this free world modernity. And state capitalist modernity, national developmentalism, is that it is very important to indicate that the capitalism for Koreans, capitalism was experienced under Japan as collective affair, okay, not individual, exploration of economic opportunities, but it was Korean nation as a whole was subjected to capitalist exploitation. So they, after liberation, they, against that experience, Koreans wanted to develop capitalism as collective political project. So the development state, came in, and Park Chung-hee especially felt strongly about realizing this historical mission. So this state capitalist modernity is another Korean modernity. It's still important. Even current government is very much like this, I think. The government and the Lee and the neoliberal economic globalism, cosmopolitan modernity, and subaltern liberal modernity in the making. Let me just skip. So, because these all, multiple modernities are, existing together, each of these modernities is still important. So, but they have different, logics and ideological and institutional conditions. So it's like geological layers, okay, turned around 90 degrees. And let me just read this passage. This is part of the book review. Imagine a vertical slice of the Earth that reveals different geological eras, each distinct in their own way. Zhang's argument is that in South Korea, it is as if that vertical slice was rotated 90 degrees and became horizontal. So each historical era is continuing today despite apparent contradictions. As a result, South Korea is a multiple theater society in which you can slip in and out of different eras of the country's past, as if you're going from theater to theater, sampling the different films being shown. So Korea is rotated, the cake slice, and because Korea is like this, the post Korea, you have to post internal multiple modern Korea is post Korea, and I wonder what kind of implications are actually. I've never thought about it, but here, because today the main argument is about the citizenship. The citizenship as transformative contributory rights is a concept I developed in order to explain. You see very liberal, similar to Western societies, that kind of citizenship in Constitution and all these formal documents of the state. Okay, but in reality, the way Koreans perceive their citizenship, and also the way they participate in the important matters of the state society, also the way they get rewarded from their participation differs from what's written formally. And I call it transformative contributory rights. That's effective and or legitimate claims to national social resources, opportunities, respect that accrue to citizens' contribution to the nation's or society's transformative purposes. Here, the corporations are included. So here, these days they talk about corporate social responsibility, corporate citizenship as an obligation and responsibilities. But in Korea, it's very important to emphasize that corporate citizenship includes a lot of actually the benefits, public benefits, arranged by the developmental state. Okay. And here, let me also explain the notion of transformative collectivism, because Korea has to deal with a lot of this economic, social, political, and other transformations. All these macro, transformations are collective matters, urgent collective, issues. So. And then also is mostly state-centered. Okay, state has to be responsible to organize all these collective transformations, etc. So, because these transformations require this collective order of organizing society and arranging resource mobilization and also benefit distribution, etc. So the citizenship regime is embedded in transformative collectivism. Okay, so Koreans are collectivists, not necessarily because they used to be collectivists, in traditional culture, but rather there's situational. Structure or structural conditions in which they have to be collectivist, and the state and society are merging, interacting so intensely, and the intermediation by education, by universities between state and society has been so important. So that's the main aspect in which I want to emphasize the importance of education. So in the process, the Korean citizenship has been educationalized. Okay, and I have been using this notion in many parts of my writings. But as I am here to address the audience here, I just wanted to check out, the different ways of the notion, the concept educationalization, being used. So there are many authors. This blurred, but it seems that it is being used, but it doesn't seem to be formally standardized, or even the notion, the concept of educationalization doesn't seem to have very strong, legitimate, status in the science of education. But so different people use the educationalization different ways, and so I think I am using that concept my own way in order to deal with the Korean situation. There are 4 aspects in which I found the citizen strong, decisive instrumentalities are found in education. In citizenship terms, it's both actually citizenship instrumentalities and citizenship risks of education in post-colonial liberal modernization. The first is condensed institutional modernization into a liberal system of social, political, and governance regulation. Second is state capitalist industrialization. And third is democratization. And fourth is technological and cultural development. Seems that the video here, PPT here is old version. It doesn't seem to have the thing I sent yesterday. So I will just read. I'll just read. The first. The condensed institutional modernization and its implications for citizenship. The liberal order of democracy and capitalism arrived in South Korea as an outcome of international political circumstances rather than through an indigenous social political revolution or evolution propelled by civil society. Such a political superimposition of the liberal order would not automatically effectuate the broad social conditions necessitated for the firm and stable rooting of liberal institutions in political, economic, and social affairs. Liberal institutional modernization without liberal historical social backgrounds would find a sort of surrogate enforcement mechanism in public education. Thus, the curricula of public education from primary to tertiary education have been systematically coordinated in accordance with the new political, economic, and social orders, internationally sanctioned and domestically absolutized. School grades and academic diplomas have thereby become the formalized certificate of citizens' conception and absorption of the liberal public order. In addition, the ubiquitous exam systems for school entrance at all levels, appointment in state offices, and even corporate private employment have reinforced the unconditional effect of public educational curricula because the respective examinees have been required to prove their mechanical mastery of school process knowledges on liberal social institutions and related civil and technological matters. In a sense, it has been process of educationalizing the grand historical project of liberal social political modernization. Here, especially in social sciences, okay. So even at the university level, our the curricula and teaching, even research, very much framed in a sort of institutional manual like knowledge system. Okay, So this is education. Okay. And in the area of education, you have the citizenship education, field, right? But this is much more than that, much bigger than that, much more structural than that. I mean, the whole there is this separate College of Social Sciences, okay? The whole College of Social Sciences itself is actually citizenship education organization. And then also as high school students, even earlier, you also go through this citizenship education because the high school curricula, include a lot of the social sciences explaining the Western modernity and its institutional, configurations. So, and then about the capitalist industrialization, as I told you, capitalism, arrived in Korea as, Japanese invasion, and then after liberation, so all these economic activities were, primarily conceived as collective, framed according to, state, the initiatives. There is some kind of the, commandism. Economic commandism prevailed under the rule of the developmental state. And this is not a socialist state, but the way economic activities, state resources are organized and arranged initiatives. There is some kind of very similar to state socialist countries. Economic commandism and also prevailed. The ending result under the rule of the developmental state. This is process of not a socialist state, but the way this is process of developmental compression. Compression is important. Okay, and what happened in state socialist countries as a result of that developmental compression. Stalinist heavy industries going nowhere in terms of providing the utilities for people's happiness, something like that. Korea, I think that the fact that too many Koreans commit suicide and people are so unhappy and despite these splendid economic the achievements, macroeconomic conditions, I think all had to do with this developmental compression. And Korean citizenship, economic citizenship, is about you have to accept this order. And also you have to find out a way to belong to the better part of this developmental compression by entering SNU, for instance. So that's and so this is very educational issue. And the third democratization, the third aspect has very closely related to the first aspect. But on the other hand, also it is important to this kind of ethnographic issue that is Korean. The democracy movement was heavily organized out of civil society and intellectual activism, etc. So the current Democratic Party has a lot of members who used to be the activists in that era. But on the other hand, there is very interesting actually study I recently noticed that during those years, 70s, 80s, etc., it's not only college students protesting, but also there's a lot of actually people low educated and poorly employed or unemployed. A lot of these actually grassroots young citizens also participated in this political social struggles. They were there, but they are not recognized. And also the police would not allow them to carry on. Okay, so this political activism of these activist students was premised on the understanding or agreement that although the state will crack down on them, control them, but they still kind of acknowledge the educationally based status of activism, whereas other non-college students and the poor people were heavily actually controlled and also harassed, etc. And even media and even social science wouldn't give justice to their presence in political participation. Like that. So this is another actually educationalized transformation. And let me. So how? So okay. So 5 minutes. About this cultural, citizenship, Korean cultural citizenship is they have the cultural citizenship as traditionalists. All Koreans are Confucian, but they also enjoy all kinds of cultures, and they teach every culture from all countries, and this cultural plurality or cultural pluralism is educational framed. Okay, so there is cultural production citizenship here. Okay, if you and college is you have to study very hard, and college is very expensive, etc. And once you get degrees from certain areas of culture or literature or whatever, and the state, people think the state is responsible to take care of them. Okay, there are actually the state programs to deal with this issue. So they want to enfranchise people with diverse degrees, a lot of different. So but you have a huge industrial army of cultural production here. Okay, you cannot think about the Korean Hallyu wave without acknowledging the fact that you have a huge supplies, unlimited supplies of this, cultural, workers. And then why family? Why is family so struggling, in this? And educational as compressed modernity is equated by family as a kind of the familial corporate purpose, okay? Because they see that education makes difference. And also because parents, not now, but in early modernization, in industrialization period, they were too old. And also they didn't, 90% of, at the beginning, they start. Afterward, 90% of people were in the countryside, and then most of them were, farmers, right? So, but on the other hand, society and economy, the nation began to change, so radically, etc. So, the only way to meaningfully participate in such transformations is to organize your children to be part of that. And then education is the most important enfranchisement mechanism. So this is not just, education is just a way of loving your children, but this is a kind of collective corporate purpose, okay, sending your children to, So the Korean families ended up becoming social investment families, in effect. Okay? And then this can be compared to a social investment state, which was propagated by neoliberals in UK, etc. Education and education, education. Anthony Giddens and Tony Blair. And now, actually, social investment state is used differently in European, the content European welfare state. But anyhow, so Korea has the social investment families. Okay, so the government and the business and society has all benefited. And so the education became a familial corporate purpose, and so on the part of children, it became parental gift. Okay, but you have to accept the emotion, the logic that your incarnation of your parental, pursuit. Okay, so you are not yourself separate from your parents, but rather you're like your parents are like your boss in this modern situation. And so because people were willing to spend on education, sending your children all the way up to universities and even grad school, etc. So, but on the other hand, state was not willing to spend too much money in setting up all these, the schools. So they mobilized the, private, civilians to enter the school education industry. It's practically industry, and they also state had to allow these private schools to profit. Okay. I mean, it's legally speaking, you are not allowed to, formally profit from it. There is no concept of profit there. But in practice, the government will make sure that your investment, business investment in education, will reward you in various deceptive, hidden ways. Okay, so this corruption is kind of normalized here. And it's very important that this mobilization of private resources is smoothly managed on the one hand. On the other hand, you have to allow them to, charge, parents expensively. Okay, so so these Korean schools, especially university, has been very expensive. Okay. Well, parents were willing to pay for it. So we have this, what I call utilitarian institutional dualities. Okay, the formal rules of all these, schooling and other aspects of education on the one, on the other hand, but there are these practical ways they deal with this. So the labor unions and teachers unions are critical about this, that government knows about all this corruption of the private schools and so on, but they can never punish. That's what they say, the labor unions and etc. But on the other hand, in a long-term perspective, the corruption is normalized. Okay, yeah. So, so this is not really corruption, but skillful way of mobilizing, private resources, because the demand for education is so huge and so rapidly growing, etc. And the government wants to maximize their investment in industrial development, not in social services. So they had to allow the business-like, operations of schools, hospitals, and welfare institutions, etc. So let me just finish it here. So everything is, nothing is too immoral or illogical, but all things are logically connected with each other if we, think about them carefully. So don't be, too sad about realities. Okay, everything has a reason. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for thought-provoking
시간을
keynote presentation. Well, I believe that you have lots of questions in your mind, but we need to keep the schedule for lunch. So we will take questions after both keynotes are finished. So we will going to move straight into the second keynote speaker without a break. So let me now introduce the second keynote speakers. So Professor Dr. Kwak from Seoul National University. Professor Kwak is a professor of philosophy of education in the Department of Education at Seoul National University. She is widely recognized for her important contribution to the field of philosophy of education, education theory, teacher education, moral education, and humanities in education. She also served as editor-in-chief of Asia Pacific Education Review and contributing significantly to the development of the educational scholarship across the Asia Pacific region and beyond. Throughout her scholarly career, Professor Kwak has engaged deeply with questions concerning the meaning and the purpose of education, the ethical dimension of teaching, the formation of the self, and the role of teachers in contemporary society. Her work invites us to think about education not simply as a system of the knowledge transmission, but as deeply human, ethical, and relational practice. Professor Kwak's scholarship is especially meaningful in relationship in this year's conference theme at a time when education is being reshaped by social, technological, culture, and global transformation. Her work reminds us of the importance of philosophical reflection, asking what kinds of human beings education helps to cultivate, what forms of knowledge and judgment matter, and how education can respond responsibly to the uncertainty of our time. So today she will present a keynote with the following title, How to Learn and Unlearn to Post-Colonial Knowledge Production in East Asia. So please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Dr. Kwak. Kwak, the floor is yours.
난 이걸로 할게요. 이걸로 할게요. 아, 네. 이걸로 할게요. It's a great honor to be here. I'm not a big figure like Professor Zhang, just delivered the first keynote. I'm just one of the faculty members in the Department of Education. It's a great honor to be able to actually ask to deliver this keynote as representative of the faculty members. Actually, my manuscript is prepared as a response to the Kurt Biesta's keynote, which originally he was supposed to be here, but which will be delivered tomorrow. But I will just read as I prepared because it can be very helpful for you because his work, his talk is a little complicated theoretically, so it will be helpful for you to understand tomorrow's. And also, of course, I have my own agenda to deliver here, okay? So I will just read, and there is text here, also you can just listen to. The title goes, Learning and Unlearning to be Post-Colonial, Knowledge Production in East Asia. Introduction. Biesta offers a philosophical diagnosis of why post-isms or post-positions have been so pervasive in contemporary scholarship. Rather than treating these positions simply as competing perspectives, he questions the very idea of taking a position and perspective. What is so useful about his approach is that he seemed to offer insight into more of an objective account of the phenomena, account of why things stand as they are, without supposedly adopting any particular perspective himself. That is, he argues that the proliferation of positions or post-positions is rooted in a more fundamental shift in the plane on which we stand in relation to the world, a shift through which we have been framed to understand ourselves as subject, necessarily correlated to world viewed as object. The key insight of his account is this shift was not historically necessary, yet nevertheless crucial to the emergence of modernity as we know of it today. Drawing upon Heidegger's essay, The Age of the World Picture, together with historical examples of perspectival drawing during the Renaissance, Biesta characterized modernity as particular configuration of the relation between the individual and the world, one that was invented at a specific historical moment. However, modernity should not be understood as simply as a worldview among others, set against, for example, Asian Greek view or East Asian worldview, as if it could be detached from them and compared from external standpoint. Rather, it should be understood as the very condition under which we live and as what makes it possible for us to speak a view of the world at all by taking positions in the first place. In this sense, the very act of debating post-East position or perspective already takes place within the modern condition that Biesta seeks to diagnose and move beyond. How then has this modern framework of the world as viewed persisted for this long and spread globally? What gives it such a power and how might we overcome it? For Biesta, its benefit lies in the freedom it affords, perhaps even freedom necessary for human survival. It enables a human being to manipulate the world for their own purpose. In this sense, he is right to argue that modern condition draws academia into a battlefield of worldview, a contest among positions and perspectives that is not merely epistemological but also political in nature. Biesta partly acknowledges this maybe have brought certain benefit to humanity, yet his concern lies elsewhere, with the price paid for such benefit. The price consists in the loss of the world as it is and the loss of the self, both of which tend to disappear in the very struggle among worldviews. While I personally agree with Biesta's big picture diagnosis, I found something to be unfairly missing from his account, something perhaps visible only from standpoint of non-Western academia. This concern may also apply to some of Biesta's other writings, which I translated a lot in Korean, where modernity or Western Enlightenment tradition is often approached primarily through political critique, with a relatively little attention given to its strengths and contribution from other puzzle perspective. Consequently, modernity and Western rationality tend to be cast in his work in a predominantly negative light. My own academic experience with them, however, point to a more ambivalent story. As a scholar from a non-Western region who is seeking full membership in global academic community, I often yet secretly perceive this ability to take perspective, not simply as a modern limitation, but also as significant intellectual achievement. It takes time and education to be acquired. I have struggled to learn how to take a perspective, finding central to becoming a competent academic. This suggests that Biesta's critique of modernity may obscure the fact that so-called perspectivism is also achievement of humanity developed over a long historical period for good reason, even if it has ultimately become intellectually and politically bankrupt, self-blind and self-contradictory. It may be true that this modern framework was historically imposed upon non-Western people for politically unjustifiable reasons through structurally unjust imperial world order. Yet, the way we have experienced, appropriated, internalized it as a young academic has not always felt simply coercive. It has also felt liberating. Within this process, we found compelling reason to master it, not only to see through the unjust world order, but also to maneuver around within and against it as responsible academics. Even the post-colonial turn I have made in my own academic work, it is often concerned with overcoming dominance of Western theories and methodologies, remains deeply indebted to this framework. It seeks to develop a theory for doing so precisely in the form of taking a perspective. Thus, I want to develop a line of thought here or a narrative from within my historical experience as Korean scholar in educational studies who want to inherit post-colonial approach to the field, approach that has been one of its major concerns since educational studies were institutionally transplanted onto Korean soil from the West in 1950s. The post-colonial questions were typically framed around how educational studies imported from the West could be localized within Korean context and thereby contribute to the formation of distinctively Korean educational theories. What I found distinctive in this pursuit was persistent investment of these scholars in the production of theory, or Biesta's term, in the methodology of taking a perspective, regardless of whether the theory was conceived as scientific or philosophical terms. I therefore begin by examining what lies behind this preoccupation with the theory, methodology, and the extent to which it can be justified before turning to more plausible mode of conducting post-colonial studies in education. For the latter, I draw on Taiwanese scholar Chan Ching-chan's idea of essay as a method, and further elaborate in the methodological implication for Korean context. This discussion ultimately returned us to the Biesta's suggestive claim that task is not merely to change our perspective, but to undergo the change of heart. To the deconstructing academic anti-colonialism is its methodological obsession. Over the past 70 years, some critical post-colonial scholars of education in Korea has warned against three forms of academic colonialism. First is academic colonization of education within educational studies, through which education is subordinated to the developmental imperatives of state and demands of national economy, as Professor Zhang just said very bleakly. In this framework, educational research becomes primarily concerned with producing ideas and policies for fostering human perspectives as academic resources for productivity, while neglecting fundamental questions of what it means to be educated. Hong Lee, former professor in SNU, a profound influential figure in Korean education studies, was among the first scholars who offered rigorous critique of this tendency. He did so by making a conceptual distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic purpose of education, tracing back to Juhi's notion of study, 공부, as a pre-modern East Asian foundation for liberal education. Lee may be regarded as one of the most brilliant scholars in Korean education studies to have articulated this critique in such explicit language and logic, what Biesta might call taking a perspective. The second form of academic colonialism concerned is what Sang-ho Zhang, another former professor in SNU, described as colonization of educational studies by non-educational disciplines. According to Zhang, educational study in Korea has been doubly subordinated to external forces, first to Western scholarship in general, and second to discipline other than education, including philosophy, psychology, and sociology. Zhang was sharply critical of what he saw as intellectual complacency of Korean scholars who merely imported and reproduced Western theories for Korean audience. In his view, many such theories did not originate within education itself, but within neighboring disciplines such as philosophy, psychology, before being adopted by scholars working in the field such as philosophy of education and educational psychology in the West. For Zhang, this condition of double colonization had to be overcome through development of new logic of education, one capable of accounting for the intrinsic rule and structure of education as disciplinary human form of practice. On this basis, he undertook ambitious attention to establish educational studies as autonomous discipline, grounded in its own logical frame and guided by its own distinctive questions and methodologies. Both thinkers are highly influential among scholars of education over 20 years, forming two representative schools, educational school in modern Korea, that sought to establish anti-colonial studies of education as a modern discipline. Their theories were sophisticated normative systems that aspired to develop academically rigorous indigenous theory of education, but their normative system tend to exclude from the view those heterogeneous aspects of educational realities in modern Korea, which could not be adequately captured by culturally indigenous ideas and concepts. Thus, in spite of the originality of their anti-colonial pursuit, their theory falls short of becoming theoretical tools or methodologies capable of disclosing understanding the lived reality of education in Korea in particular, and East Asia more broadly. This is why I have recently drawn to have been drawn to. Chinese scholar Chen's idea of Asia as a method as a way of pursuing decolonized forms of knowledge production. Chen's approach seemed to be particularly relevant in response to the third form of academic colonialism, which Zhang had already identified: importation of Western theories to explain and understand educational context in Korea, driven by desire to catch up with most fashionable theories from the West. Resisting binary opposition between the West and non-West as itself another colonial legacy, Chen's strategy for decolonization is to warn Asian scholars of being not too much obsessed with the West, but rather to take it as one of many sources that have historically shaped the modern minds of Asians through the process of modernization. In other words, he asked Asian scholars to provincialize the Europe, not to universalize it, so as to focus on the ways Asians have experienced in the process of modernization in relation to their own tradition as well as to the West. But let me first provide some background to better contextualize Chen's idea of Asia as a method in addressing academic dilemmas experienced by researchers like myself. Sociologist Kyungman Kim described social scientists working in Korea as intellectual orphans. He criticizes scholars such as Jung In-gang, Hae Jung-jo, among others, likening the pursuit of the indigenous theory detached from the universal current of global academics to the form of academic babbling. Jung In-gang, in response, however, forcefully criticized Western centrism that underlies Kim's argument. The debate between Kim and Gang illustrates persistent tension between, on one hand, cultural essentialist tendency often found in indigenous theorization, and on the other hand, a form of Western universalism that suggests it is nearly impossible to escape Western-centric academic structure. This tension generates a profound sense of confusion over identity price among young social and educational researchers in Korea. Of course, this is neither recent or unique to Korean educational scholars and social scientists. It is a common problem faced by scholars in various East Asian countries, borrowed Western academic knowledge since the late 19th century and early 20th century. This is why the Chinese scholar Chen proposed Asia as a method, as a possible breakthrough toward autonomous knowledge production by Asian scholars. His book, Asia as a Method Toward the Imperialization, he does not unconditionally reject Western centrism in academia, nor simply dismiss essentialist attitude that assumes the superiority of Asian culture. Rather, he acknowledges both tendencies as historically significant academic resources and proposes a method of dual distancing that maintains critical distance from both internal cultural attachment and external Western universalism. Here, Chen seemed to offer a practical method of academic inquiry that continuously navigate the intellectual terrain both within and outside ourselves in order to discern what is possible and appropriate for us. Chen's proposal has already actually inspired the non-Western education researchers seeking to conduct research from post-colonial perspective and opened a new horizon for both theoretical discussion and empirical inquiry. According to Takayama, for example, this third path clearly involves choosing new way of perceiving the world. He holds that rather than viewing East Asia as epistemological other, defined in opposition to Western universalism, you should participate in education research as independently scholarly subject who acknowledges the situated context of our own perception. The third approach aimed to go beyond researching East Asian education merely as area study or as a regional object of inquiry. It emphasizes East Asia as not simply a physical or geographical category, but also construct of cultural, racial, historical, and existential significance. Those, as Takayama hold, East Asia may be understood as dynamic and practical category, one that occupies specific positionality within global knowledge production, while also possessing the potential to dismantle and rearrange political, cultural, and ontological dimension of the very positionality. I will try to show one example of doing this. Two modes of knowledge, relative knowledge and absolute knowledge. When Chen proposed Asia as a method, he seemed to have in mind distinctive form of East Asian subjectivity constituted through twofold dialectical movement. That is why I think he advanced bold methodological proposal for practicing this form of subjectivity in Asian studies within context of Asia. One aims not only at self-understanding, but also cross-cultural understanding. This means that his approach seeks to conduct Asian studies in a way that transcends Asia, rather than simply dissolving into Asia or into Asians. Its methodological dialect can be formulated as follows. To understand Asia from inside out without taking Western eyes as a reference point, and yet mutually relativize both Asia and the West through mediating process of self-objectification. As Chen put it, quote, in this way, narcissistic being can be liberated and transformed into becoming, unquote. What should be noted here are two methodological movements of distancing. First, understanding Asia from inside out without Western eyes, and then mutually relativizing both Asia and West. I found this formulation especially compelling because it describes a specific methodological practice we can call upon to enact in educational studies as a form of self-transformation. However, this formulation needs to be further elaborated and articulated if it is become methodologically usable in our research. I will show how these two movements can operate for our research by appropriating French philosopher Henry Louis Bergson's distinction between two modes of knowledge, relative knowledge and absolute knowledge, which I encountered very recently in my reading. For Bergson, there are two fundamentally different modes of knowing or gain access to the world, relative and absolute. Former is always mediated by symbols such as concepts or language, whereas the latter is immediate, beginning from within the thing itself and moving toward concepts only in order to return to the thing itself. Former corresponds to our everyday habitual way of thinking, that is thinking through concept. The second involves reversal of this mode of thinking and point to what Bergson says, a genuine form of thinking, that is thinking with the spirit. Bergson illustrates this distinction through a very simple and mundane example, the case of a French person learning foreign languages such as English. Relative knowledge is knowledge from the outside. It is an attempt to know something externally through signs and symbols. In this sense, it resembles learning English through French, recognizing, acquiring English pronunciation by means of the elements of French pronunciation, learning each letter one by one, and then combining them in order to produce a particular sound. To know English pronunciation relatively for Bergson is therefore to know it while remaining outside England, that is, while remaining in France as French speaker. Absolute knowledge, by contrast, is inner knowledge. It begins from the thing itself and seeks to arrive at the thing itself. Thus, to know English pronunciation absolutely as knowledge from within, I must not remain in France. I must move to England and come to know it not from where I am, but from where it is. I must go to England, living among its people, participate in the English way of life, and immerse oneself in the speech of native speakers. In absolute knowledge, we encounter the things not first from its part, but as a whole, and then are resolved into its part. Here we can see the relative knowledge tend to reconstruct what is not yet known. For English, for example, through elements or signs that are already familiar to the oneself, French person. If I don't know the pronunciation of French alphabet, it becomes very difficult for me to learn English in this way. Sign represents something common both to what I already know and to new thing I don't know yet. In this sense, relative knowledge entails generality. It represents what is shared rather than what is proper to the individual thing itself. This is the very usefulness of sign. A perspective applied to what I already know can also apply to the new object I seek to know. Signs and perspectives, therefore, have a tendency to become increasingly general. They tend, in other words, to universalize themselves by their nature. In philosophy, according to Bergson, two opposed systems of thought may in fact be no more than two different points of view on the one and the same object, an object that itself belongs neither to one point of view nor the other point of view. This points to the problem involved in what Biesta calls taking a perspective. To take perspective or take a point of view is adopt a particular attitude toward an object in the light of practical needs or human purpose for action, rather than for the sake of the thing itself, object itself. This is entirely different, according to Bergson, from reality as seen from within. Absolute knowledge requires one be able to transport oneself into interior of what one seeks to know through something like intellectual sympathy. This mode of knowing is superior to or goes beyond relative knowledge and corresponds to what Bergson called intuition. It is what enables us, through effort of intuition, to enter into the thing we wish to know or think. Rather than taking a point of view on the thing from outside, absolute knowledge seeks to sympathize intellectually with the thing itself. It is mode of thought that breaks with our habitual way of thinking, that proceeds from concept to things, and instead that begins from thing itself. Yet this latter movement is not easy to undertake, especially for modern person like us, who are taking position all the time. It requires an effort of intellectual expansion on our part, Bergson says. One must remain oneself while becoming greater than oneself, to the point where other things can enter into oneself. Such effort would not be possible unless ourselves were in some way united with the ground of things. In this mode of knowing, thought begins from the thing and moves toward the concept. Once we have situated ourselves in the thing, we can then descend from there into various concepts. We can also understand more clearly how and why these different concepts can be applied to the thing in the first place. Here we can see the role and value of absolute knowledge and of the mode of thinking associated with it. What is so insightful about Bergson's account of two modes of knowing or thinking for our purpose is fourfold. First, concepts are tools of relative thinking, are originally invented for practical convenience of human life. Second, however, the absolute mode of knowledge, knowledge from within, is the very source of concept. Third, modern conception, then things themselves are unreachable, external to us, arise naturally from the demand of human survival, namely need to control the world and life. Finally, although our separation from the world through concept may be necessary for the life of survival, it is not necessary for thinking itself. Seeking absolute knowledge is therefore a way of moving beyond self-centeredness, driven by survival, to become greater than ourselves by coming into contact both with ourselves and with the world. For Bergson, we should not simply live with objects only insofar as they fit the current set of concepts available to us. We should seek to encounter them beyond these conceptual limits. Absolute mode of thinking is not merely thinking for its own sake, rather it is what brings us back into contact with the world and with reality while allowing us to understand how and why different concepts can be applied to the thing itself with a sense of orientation. Last section, practicing Asia's method, moving beyond taking positions. Let me now turn to the dual movement of distancing and change the idea of Asia's method. If we characterize the first movement, understanding Asia from inside out, as the pursuit of absolute knowledge of Asia from within, then we may understand the second movement, mutual relativization for self-objectification, as the pursuit of relative knowledge of ourselves through comparison between the West and Asia. The first movement concerned the search for the East Asian way of being, one that has never been adequately grasped by our West-oriented perspective on education, yet has always already been with us as intimate as our own skin. The second movement involved moving back and forth between two cultures, West and Asia, viewing each through lens of the other in the ways that serve practical or political purpose in life, such as avoiding pitfalls of cultural essentialism or Western universalism. If the first movement leads us toward unfamiliar-looking old value or concept to be recovered, the second movement leads us to consider where and how the old value or concept can be resituated, put back to the work in our everyday context in a politically more just manner. Thus, the second movement of mutual relativization seems especially crucial in education research, as it enables all the concepts and values to be recontextualized within contemporary society in ways make their recovery possible in a meaningful way. To show how this interpretation of dual movement of distancing in Chen's idea of Asia as a method might work in education research, let me consider a Korean moral emotion called apologetic indebtedness, 죄송함, 빚진 마음, toward others. A few educational psychologists in Korea working within the tradition of indigenous psychology have conducted a sense of studies on Korean adolescents' sense of this emotion toward their parents. In the Korean moral affective register, the sense of indebtedness and feeling of sorry, feeling of being sorry, are not merely forms of individual guilt or shame. Rather, they are relational moral sentiment formed through awareness that one has received something from others, burdened them, and failed to reciprocate or responded inadequately to their care. This emotion has several distinctive features. First, 죄송함 is not a simple emotion. It is deeply connected hierarchy, politeness, faith, relational distance embedded in the Korean culture. Refer to more differential and ritualized forms of relational self-humbling. In this respect, it differs from more ordinary apologetic feeling, 미안함, which is more commonly addressed to the intimate or relatively equal relationship. Second, 죄송함 differs from gratitude, 감사함, as it often understood in Western sense. In ontologically interdependent society like Korea, gratitude may be more closely associated with indebtedness or a sense of obligation to respond in return. Western positive psychology usually treats gratitude primarily as a positive emotion, but in Korean context, gratitude often takes the following form. I'm grateful because I have received a favor. Therefore, I must be paid. Yet, because I cannot repay it adequately, I feel sorry that I must try to better. This emotion is not necessarily oriented toward direct repayment to the person who has done us a favor, since the favor itself may not be the kind that demands immediate return. Indeed, the person who has offered care and support may have done so unconditionally without necessarily expecting future repayment. Thus, one is not expected to return the favor at once, but rather to carry its burden indefinitely, precisely because one does not know when and even whether adequate repayment will become possible. What in fact one is expected to do in return is to try to become a better person. In this sense, gratitude involved in 죄송함 may entail not only joy or appreciation, but also moral pressure to respond appropriately or adequately. Finally, this emotion seems to be cultivated more centrally in ritualized relationship between parents and children, between teacher and student, or between senior and junior. In such a hierarchical relationship, it's usually the more vulnerable party, that weaker and younger person, who is expected to experience this emotion more intensely. Most Koreans knows what this sentiment feels like, especially in relation to their parents. However, the majority of educational psychologists in Korea have relied on Western psychological framework when investigating the main factor in parent-children relation that affects adolescents' academic achievement. In doing so, they have often forced Korean psyche into Western framework. As a result, they have failed to explain adequately the distinctive phenomena of Korean parent-child relation in connection to academic achievement. This failure may stem from a lack of attention to our own experience of 죄송함, or from indifference to its significance in shaping personhood in Korean culture. Traditionally, to be ungrateful in this sense was regarded as something close to being less than fully human. A second possible reason for this failure may be ideological in its nature, since this sentiment is deeply bound up with hierarchical relationship. Moral emotion of apologetic indebtedness is often treated as psychological disposition rooted in a backward pre-modern legacy that ought to be overcome in modern democratic Korea, where norms of moral conduct have increasingly shifted toward contract-based and egalitarian relationship under the influence of Western liberalism. This psyche is therefore regarded by some as a source of corruption or injustice. One example can be found in Korean university culture, where entrance rites of passage were once widely practiced. Those rites, including forced drinking, were understood as a way of cultivating a particular form of intimate yet hierarchical belonging between senior and junior student. This is precisely the kind of indigenous practice from which many young college students now wish to distance themselves. Many students adopting individualistic, egalitarian, liberal standpoint refuse to participate in such practice and regard them as unjust forms of pressure. Thus, the cultural work involved in cultivating a apologetic sense of indebtedness, especially the pressure not to fall short of expectation from the elderly, seem to have been dramatically eroded among young generation today. I believe this may be a good thing for our society as a whole. Yet on Teachers' Day last May, when I met a group of junior undergraduates, I heard something that seemed to reveal fascinating transformation in moral sentiment of apologetic indebtedness. They told me that there is no longer any membership training resembling first drinking practice of the past. Instead, senior students now invite junior to cordial gathering in more friendly manner, often over meals. When I asked who usually pay for the food, they replied rather surprisingly, the seniors always do. When I asked how they felt about this practice, they said they experienced it as something festive, as gift freely given to them without any demand in return. They deeply appreciate this practice and felt a sense of belonging through this. Senior paid for them without asking for anything in return, such as recognition of their seniority or deference to their authority. Then I heard something even more surprising. When the juniors asked their seniors why they were doing this for them, the seniors replied that this was how they themselves have been treated by their own seniors when they first entered the university. They therefore felt indebted to their seniors and obliged to do so the same thing for their own juniors in return. The students sitting before me then told me that they too would like to continue this practice with their own juniors next year. At that moment, as someone many years their senior, I somehow found myself feeling blessed. The formal practice has changed in a way that respects and appeals to the participants' voluntary will. Yet the key spirit of the original practice, a sense of belonging and indebtedness, remains. The same spirit seems to continue across generations, flowing through the practice that has been transformed over time. I'm not suggesting here this is how things ought to be, nor do I claim that this count captured the whole story behind the university culture associated with this practice. I have introduced this case only to suggest it may serve as one example of what it might mean to enact the dual movement of distancing educational research. The first movement is to return to our deep-rooted psyche underlying our educational relation with parents, teachers, and seniors, namely sense of apologetic indebtedness, by making it unfamiliar to ourselves. This movement seems to open horizons through which we can better understand the nature of its indigenous psyche and to respond to what has been given to us as gift. This self-understanding from within, no longer mediated primarily by Western concept, then enables us to undertake more sensible second movement of mutual relativization between Western and Asian culture. Here, relativization is not undertaken without reflection or practical judgment. Rather, it is pursued in search of third path between Western individualism and East Asian relational ontology, while maintaining distance from the political people of both. In this way, post-colonial methodology of education research structurally involves both modes of knowledge or thinking, the absolute and relative. And it keeps open the question of where we might go in search of better vision of educational practice for ourselves, but without severing the search from what has already been given to us. Thank you. This will be the end. I don't have time, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for the insightful keynote presentation. Thank you, Dr. Kwa. Well, we have a very short time for have some question from the audience. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand and we will give you a microphone.
쌤도 나오셔야 되지 않아요? 쌤도 나오시고요. 쌤도 나오셔야 돼요.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. My first question, I have two questions, very short. My first question goes to Professor Shan. Insightful presentation. Given that the growing tendency to place societal expectations on education, how can policymakers balance investment in education with complementary reforms in employment expected to solve problems it can address or it cannot address alone? That's the first question to Professor Chan. And the second question to Professor Kwak. As a young researcher from the Global South, I seek greater visibility in academia. How can we balance meeting global research standards while preserving local knowledge systems, languages, and perspectives without simply reproducing existing academic hierarchies? Thank you.
Shall I?
Sure.
Thank you for the important question. Actually, that question enables me to address what's left in my presentation. I briefly mentioned the citizenship risk of educationalized mobility. So now I like to say two things. One is that we live in a post-compressed modern era, and all these citizenship instrumentalities of education are not as strong as before. Okay, so the benefits, the returns to your education wouldn't be as great as in earlier generations. Right? So, but still. Universities and other educational institutions are very, they have some kind of inertia. So they, presume that, they don't really have to, fundamentally restructure. And I think this creates a lot of problems at various levels of education. On the other hand, the educationalized mobility, educationalized processes of this institutional modernization and cultural changes and developmental transformations. Although I addressed them in citizenship terms, but we're talking about all these meritocratic differences, inequalities, and etc. So although you have participated in education as very important collective requirements, but the reward to the participation have never been equal. And this university is responsible for the big part of that, inequalities, which cannot be justified in this original collective contributory rights. Right? So people don't really have the good feelings about. Many people are very critical of media, are very sensitive, etc. So I think at the now it's their 80th birthday. I think this is one of the things they have to reflect upon. That what contributions they've made to the compressed mobility of Korea, and also what silence, restore, personality. They are responsible. Thank you very much. I don't think I have answered your question effectively, but just excuse. Thank you.
And I take your question why we need another academic standard to the Western standard. Actually, I studied in the US for my PhD. When I was there at this college at Columbia University, actually one of very famous feminist teachers, she was a philosopher. She, in the big lecture, she was very popular. She said, I think she said something very important, and then I just remember she said, all those students who are from the South or what is it, the Global South, probably including Korea too at that time, it's 30 years ago, go back to your home country. Why you are here, go back to your home country, do the work there, So I felt so shocked to hear that, I felt I'm in the wrong place, and also, I just couldn't, I took it, somehow I took it as an insult rather than insult on my, intellect, than respect for my culture, But I couldn't figure out, maybe while I writing this manuscript, that case kept coming, to me. But at that time I thought where we should go, to learn better, Of course, I'm from SNU, my teachers are good, but I thought there is not enough options, or perspectives to look through, which I noticed from all the curriculum when I went through the textbook in the K-12 education, So I knew there is bigger world, and that's why I went there, and one famous philosopher said that, So, but now I can see why she said that and what's the cost I have to pay, by learning there. Although not all the way, which is the loss of my own culture, the loss of my, the language by which I can explain how I felt through, while going through all those education I owned, So a lot of languages I'm using, academic language, usually to me, the Western languages are most sophisticated, So I tend to just adopt it. Then sometimes I felt that's not really capturing what I feel, and I'm losing the sense of how I perceive the world while I'm here, That's the thing. My 죄송함, the reason I address this is, we are losing that sense of emotion, I think, I'm not sure young student here in SNU really remember it, but that's the very important emotion who shaped who I am, and that emotion tend to be weakened. I was panicked. I have to know how to make sense of it, It's important, valuable emotion, which have shaped me, so I have to make sense of it, give some word to that, and I don't know, that's sort of a feeling I have. And why we have that standard? Because we are losing our own world, our own experience, by adopting very sophisticated, fancy, languages to master. Thank you.
Well, I think we do not have time for more questions. So please give a big applause for our two awesome keynote speakers. So now we want to welcome the welcome reception with lunch, which will begin after this. I have one housekeeping note that you are welcome to enjoy lunch here, this main room, or standing outside the lobby. But please note that eating is strictly prohibited in the lobby study area, where you will see indoor standing banners in front of the doors. So we kindly ask your cooperation in keeping that safe, clean for students. So also, second, the quick note for our invited speakers. We would like to highly appreciate if we could kindly come down in front of our stage. So we would like to take some few photos inside and also have some photos outside of the photo wall. Okay. Okay. So we hope you enjoy.